Well, good evening and welcome to the Cary Lecture Series number 3 for the evening. How many people here, this is the first time you've been to the Cary Lectures? Anyone here? Great. So the Cary Lectures are over 100 years old. We can thank the two Cary sisters for providing a donation, the creation of the Isaac Hayes Cary Foundation. And thanks to those benefactors, we actually built this hall here. This beautiful hall here was funded by the sisters and a series of free lectures. They wanted to bring to the town of Lexington speakers from all different topics, except for politics and religion, turns out, but any other topic to inspire the residents. So we thank you all for coming out. We're a volunteer committee. I'm Kevin Oya. We have Rita Goldberg, we have Merle Lunan, and Omar Kudari. Where is he? Right there. We had the joy of coming up every year with 4 speakers. Before we get into this evening's speakers, a couple of public service announcements. If you should hear the fire alarm go off, please look around, find an exit door, and that's where you would want to exit if you hear the alarm. Once you hear the alarm, exit the building, and please do not re-enter until the Lexington firemen give you permission to come back in. We have never had a fire alarm during a Cary lecture, so we'd like to continue that trend. The other thing is our last speaker is Raj Chetty, the economist. There's a poster outside just to remind you. We look forward to seeing you all then as well, if you're interested in that topic as well. Tonight, how many people here know Jeff Leonard? Yay! So, clearly, Jeff is a loved person in the town of Lexington. I don't have to give him an introduction because he's going to share things about his story that I didn't even hear before growing. I myself did not grow up here, but my 2 boys did. They interacted with Jeff and the music program, and it's going to be a special evening. Jeff has brought along friends and panelists who he'll also introduce. So with no further ado, please, Jeff, take it away.
Are we functioning? You've got me okay? Okay, good. Well, first of all, when I've seen the names on this list, I was a little overwhelmed that why would they choose the band director? But I really appreciate seeing so many faces. It's you know, hard to speak sometimes here. But I want to thank the committee for offering this opportunity for me. And our panel, who will be up here later night volunteering time. I especially want to thank Kevin because he was my guidance, my leader, my shepherd through this whole thing, and I don't even know what you'd be hearing if it wasn't for Kevin's help with putting this all together, so much appreciated with all of that. Obviously, one of the things is this type of performance is very different than the type I'm used to, so jumping around on it. But a life in music was what I was asked to be the theme, and I was looking on that, trying to figure out what are you going to do with that and where you're going to go with that as we talk through it. And I want to focus on people who've made a commitment to music, not necessarily for the vocation, but what they have done with their lives, and people who have considered to be important enough to spend their time. And that's one of the most important things that we can think about is that our time is valuable and how do we spend it. But let's start with a little bit of research about the importance of music and music education and see where we can go in that. When I started as a band director here back in 83, 82, when I was student teaching, we got bumper stickers that was mailed to us by the Music Educators National Conference. So they were blue bumper stickers. They had this sort of drawing of a person playing a bass drum and a big smile, and it said, "Music makes you smarter." And of course, every administrator in town bought that and raised the salaries right away. There were studies going on, it was being backed up. But let's look at some of the things that are out there right now. First thing, let's look at something from the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement. First of all, you got that little cartoon there. I don't understand why your test scores don't go up. We cut music, art, PE, recess, put in a 3-hour math and reading blocks and test prep. Why aren't your scores going up? Well, what the International Association of Evaluation and Educational Achievement came up with in their study is the schools that produce the highest academic achievement on a regular basis today are spending 20 to 30% of the day in the arts, with a special emphasis on music. That's pretty important, and that's a fairly big organization. Sad thing is we only see this type of thing when people's MCAS scores study, and the people in the inner cities are the ones that are the most vulnerable to this, where they struggle. They pull them out of the arts, give them triple math, and it's not a good idea. We'll see more of that a little later on. Let's go to the UK, and let's go to a master teacher of music at the Edinburgh Academy. He writes this, and this is he doesn't cite all the studies, but why do pupils tend to gravitate towards the music department before, during, and after school? Former music students, sound familiar? It's because their physical, mental, and emotional safe space. Music helps them connect with others and express themselves in such a unique way. It nurtures health and well-being. Now again, we know the studies are there. They aren't cited here. In my experience, backs that up altogether. The students come in the morning. It's the first place they come in the morning when they go to school. They come in for lunch. They spend the free blocks of their after schools in the evening. They have a locker somewhere in the school that they have no idea where it is because everything's stored in their locker in the music room. And it's, it creates a small cohort when you come to a big high school like Lexington, where there are like-minded people and family that you know for 4 years, and it becomes your home away from home and a real safe space. Now, from the 2014 study entitled Behavior and Neural Correlates of Executive Functioning in Musicians and Non-Musicians, this is what they found. Replacing music programs with reading or math instruction in order to boost standardized test scores may actually lead to deficient skills in other cognitive areas. So our bumper sticker said, music makes you smarter, so not studying music makes you not smart? Maybe. I never knew if that was cause or effect, but something else, as people are looking at college admissions and things like that, from a band director friend of mine who went on a college visit with her son to Duke, and we've heard this a lot. Incredible new information from my band director friends. Did a campus tour of Duke University today that started with a presentation by the admission director. She said, please don't take every AP class your school offers. That won't help you get into Duke. Make sure you participate in music at your school. Play a sport. Show leadership. We want well-rounded human beings here. I've heard that from MIT. I've heard that from Harvard. I've heard that from almost everywhere I've looked. Doesn't stop a lot of us, but it's something worth thinking about to push on. Let's look at some actual research studies in other places. Here's something from the Harvard Medical School through the Harvard Graduate School of Education. My dear friend David Rose, who I think might be here somewhere, there he is, he handed me a lot of this great material a few years ago in a big book. This is from a study from Why Music is Good for the Brain. These are the things they come up with, right? Music has been shown to activate just about all of the brain. This is important because the expression use it or lose it has been shown to be very accurate when it comes to the brain. Because it activates almost all of the brain regions, it keeps networks strong. Areas that include well-being, learning, cognitive function, quality of life, and happiness. Can music really affect your well-being, learning, cognitive function, and quality of life and happiness? The musicians among you would say, yeah, we knew that, right? A recent survey on music in the brain that was conducted by AARP, so we're looking at a different age range here, revealed some interesting findings about the impact of music on cognitive and emotional well-being. Music listeners had higher scores for mental well-being and slightly reduced levels of anxiety and depression compared to people overall. Of survey respondents who currently go to musical performances, 69% rate their brain health as excellent or very good, compared to 58% for those who went in the past and 52% for those who never attended. Of those who reported often being exposed to music as a child, 68% rated their ability to learn new things as excellent or very good, compared to 50% who were not exposed to music. Active musical engagement, including those over 50, was associated with higher rates of happiness and good cognitive function. And finally, adults with no early music exposure but who engage in some music appreciation show above average mental well-being scores. Helps every age. Let's go to the University of Southern California. Dr. Beatrice Ilari, the chair of the Music of Teaching and Learning at USC, has been involved in an enormous amount of important studies. These are some of the results of some of the things she has done along the way. After a survey done after the pandemic shows that adolescents Music education benefits go well beyond increasing a surge in neural connections in their brain. It actually boosts their well-being. Another one, music might be an activity to help students develop skills and competencies, work out their emotions, engage in identity work, and strengthen connections to the school and community. A longitudinal study by the USC Brain and Creativity Institute demonstrate that children who learn a musical instrument have enhanced cognitive function, period. And then finally, the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health has shown that music education contributes to improved creativity, confidence, better mental health, emotional stability, and overall student performance. Maybe we should remove the music teacher bias from this for a little bit. Let's look at a study from the American Scientist called "The Argument for Music Education." And I'm going to give you a little bit of the background of it here, because I think this is one of the most important things we can talk about. The notion that the brain is malleable, a trait we now call neuroplasticity, dates back more than a century to the earliest days of neuroscience. We have a neuroscience on our panel last night. I was going to have him come up and explain this because it's a little beyond me, but we'll talk later about it. Spanish neuroscientist Santiago Ramon y Cajal, who is remembered today chiefly for his drawing of brain cells, also discovered that cellular projections wax and wane throughout an organism's life, a phenomenon he poetically termed neural gymnastics. He intuited that the nervous system is dynamic. But rigorously documenting and studying these plasticity changes in the brain remained out of reach for decades. And then in the 70s and 80s, when tracking the activity of a single neuron became possible, scientists could finally prove that learning was rooted in changes to a neuron's physiology. Basically, its proclivity to spark a jolt of electricity, sending signals to other neurons. Musicians dedicate their lives to focused, disciplined, repeated practice. Moreover, playing music offers an unlimited capacity for improvement. Musicians constantly strive for nuance, defter technique, better synchrony with their ensembles. Articles implying a link between musicianship and brain plasticity started to appear. Violinists had enlarged motor brain areas dedicated to the hand. Expert musicians made finer judgments about sounds that differed subtly in timing and pitch. To begin the study, a college cohort was created, half of whom were avid musicians and the other half were musically naive. One of their discoveries, for instance, was that musicians could pick up an acoustic detail of Mandarin speech that was too subtle for almost every other English speaker. It suggested that music training creates more precocious listeners. As these hypotheses were tested further with larger cohorts, 3 arguments took shape. They created an indirect argument, the incentive argument, and the intangible argument to show the benefits of music education. So, these are the folks that did the study, Traus and Weitzwolch. The indirect argument posits that music boosts the brain and cognitive function that is important for learning. In turn, these heightened skills facilitate success in school. School administrators and policymakers should invest in music education because it best equips students to fare better in their courses. Children and adults with music training, for example, have superior ability to understand speech in noisy environments, as in some classrooms. But the types of benefits associated with indirect argument are a step removed from what school administrators are mandated academic benchmarks, like standardized tests and such. So, therefore, we talk about the incentive argument, which directly ties benefits of music education to educational outcomes, such as standardized testing, attrition, grade point average, college matriculation, even health outcomes. They discovered that some of the most profound neurodevelopmental benefits of music manifest itself in ways that are difficult to quantify in robust research studies, leading them to an intangible argument, which proposes that the deepest benefits of music education are challenging to reduce to a set of data points and parameters. Such benefits include the focus and discipline that comes from years of regular practice, social engagement and satisfaction that grow when making music an ensemble, the friendships that result from staying 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week after school for rehearsals, the confidence that develops from performing alone on a stage. For them, for the American Scientist, And these researchers, the intangible argument rings true as most likely and the most accurate description of how music education benefits children. Convinced yet? Had me at music makes you smarter. But one of the things that I've been asked to do with this is to, oops, I went back and I didn't want to. There we are. I got to get over to the, sorry, having a bit of a problem getting, connecting to my text here. And it's not getting there. Got a little social difficulty here. I may have to log out and log back in. I can't even find my cursor. It's missing. What's that? I'll come out of it and pop back into it and see if it will do that. And nope. All right, let's try again. Get back to where we were. My apologies, folks. This is going to hold us up a little bit. We were there, and we'll see if I can get back to it. Yes, I'm good. All right. One of the things the committee asked me to do was talk about my story. And in truth, I could spend an hour and a half on every year I spent at Lexington High School and all the time in between. So what I'm going to focus on is truly my story, how I came up in music, because it's a unique path, and it started inauspiciously and has many interesting crossroads to it along the way, some focal points to it along the way. So when I was in 4th grade, I knew I was going to be a lawyer because I loved to watch Perry Mason and Judd for the Defense and all those legal things on TV. That was my thing. But I was also at that point inspired by the Monkees. Some of you remember the Monkees. Who remembers the Monkees? You know, they're the pop group made for TV, right? Their music. And I decided, well, you know, maybe it'd be fun to learn to play some guitar. Now, my parents had no musical background at all, and I presented this to them, and they tried to help out, and they did. They bought me, it was a plastic guitar with steel strings, and they found a place that provided group lessons. It was a gentleman, really nice guy, and I studied with him for about, not privately, in group lessons, for about a year and a half, and I think I learned about 12 chords, and that was it, chords and strumming patterns. There were no literacy, no note reading. And some songs, Down in the Valley I could play, it was all in one position, things like that. And I kept playing along, and some of my friends had started in band instruments. It wasn't a big thing in Virginia, where I grew up. I grew up in Arlington, Virginia. It wasn't a big thing to start band in elementary school because of the way the junior highs and high schools were put together. But I had some friends in 6th grade, and one played trumpet, and one played clarinet, and one played piano, and we made a band. And we got to play at the 6th grade, at the school talent show. We played Love is Blue. Everybody know that tune? And we were a big hit, at least our parents said so. But we had a lot of fun playing together and getting together and trying other things that were pop tunes at the time and that sort of thing. Then in 6th grade, my teacher then, Ms. Nielsen, came to me and said, look, our music teacher, Mr. Hutchinson, this is Mr. Hutchinson of Spurrier and Hutchinson of S&H Green Stamps. His father was that guy. He was a flute player. Wanted to just start a recorder quartet, and I know you like music. Would you be interested in joining? I said, sure. That sounds like fun. I'll do that. So this is my sort of first crossroad. And there were 4 of us: Andy Tanzer, Betsy Owl, and Christine. I'm going to lose that last name. Okay, how come I can't remember her name from 4th grade? Well, anyway, Christine Hughes. Now, we all went down, and he gave us all a recorder, and he taught us where the fingers went and named a few notes and how to play a few notes and said, take your recorder home and practice and that sort of thing. We did. Came back the next week for a lesson. He put some music in front of us. Now, the other 3 had been playing piano since 2nd grade. And I had not played anything. I was completely musically illiterate. I could not read music. I didn't know the note values, the rhythms, the staff, anything. So they were playing their parts, and I'm fumbling all over it and struggling and trying to figure out what goes where. And we were about half an hour. And at the end of that half an hour, Mr. Hutchinson, with the quartet sitting there, came up and said, could you give me back your recorder? Said, I'm going to have to find someone to replace you. And then he said, some people will be players in music, and some people will just be listeners, and I'm afraid you'll probably just be a listener. Well, I knew I wasn't anywhere near as good as the rest of the people in the class. I was a little disappointed because I would have liked to try, but I went back to class, and that was the end of my recorder career. for that point. All right. Next year, though, we moved to 7th grade, and this is where things differ in school systems. 7th grade, we started as beginning band. They had a beginning band, an intermediate band, and an advanced band, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and it met 5 days a week during the full school year, which is what happens in most of the civilized world, just not in New England, where we start with a half an hour for 1 week, once a week. That's another topic for another time. But I was going to go in, and this is sort of the second crossroad. I was going to go in, and I had friends that played the clarinet. A good friend, I was going to play the clarinet. But they were making sure that the instrumentation was balanced. They had 60-some people there for beginning band, and they wanted to make sure all the instruments were covered. So I had to put my name in the hat, because clarinet was very popular. So I put my name in the hat, and my name didn't get drawn. I didn't get drawn for clarinet, so my band director, who was my band director from 7th grade through 12th grade, he came over and said, Jeff, we didn't draw your name, but would you mind playing the saxophone? And I said, I was there, I was in band, it was in my schedule. He said, no, sure, okay. And he said, good, okay, thanks. Would you like to play alto or tenor? And of course I said tenor because I thought it was the little one, which is how little I knew, I knew nothing. So there I was walking home from school, and I've got this huge case when I'm expected to be carrying a clarinet. Anyway, I got into it, and I enjoyed what was going on in 7th grade. We learned, we were playing every day. So really, by the end of our first year, we were better in that year than a lot of junior high czar bands straight through, the senior bands. But in the winter, Williamsburg Junior High, they had a jazz band. And they did an in-school concert, because they used to do those things there. And they played Going Out of My Head and Whiter Shade of Pale. They played bona fide pop hits and songs I knew and had heard on the radio. And there were saxophones up there, and I thought, hey, maybe I could do that. So I talked to my band director about it, and Arlington County, the county I grew up in, they ran summer music camps. And in the morning, between 7th and 8th grade, I went to this sort of very beginning jazz thing that they put on, and then I stayed for the afternoon and did their intermediate band, because then I could skip over intermediate band in 8th grade and go straight into the advanced band in 8th grade, so where I met a lot of friends. Well, it was just a wonderful thing, and I realized then, if I had played clarinet, I might have never even thought about the jazz program, because I didn't see the instrument up there. So I would have thought, well, I can't do that. I remember my first experience in that young jazz band soloing. I had a written solo on a piece called Blues Around the Block. It's in trauma even now. And I was reading through the solo, and I got lost on it. And I kept playing, and I was near the end, and it was in the key of my G. And I suddenly played a B flat and then landed on the G. So this blues sound came out. My director went, yeah! And I knew that I had the key to improvisation then. You had to play B flat. If you played B flat, you were playing jazz. Until we did something in D, and that changed completely. And I learned that that's not going to make it. And that's when I started to get curious about that, the idea of improvising and that type of thing. I played in the jazz band, and I was able to get sub into it in 8th grade and played through it in 9th grade. And then we went to the high school. Now, in the high school, I joined the band up there, and there were 2 jazz bands, the Jazz Lab, which met 5 days a week during school, and a group called the Thursday Night Crowd that met, obviously, on Thursday nights for 2 hours, sort of a feeder group. It was a younger group, and I was in that one. I played as a sophomore and a junior and picked up a lot by listening and practicing, observing the older kids, those kids who had been in that junior high band when I was younger, seeing what they were doing in the top level group, knowing some of them, making some friends, playing along with records. That type of stuff is what we did at this point. And then we hit a third crossroad, which we'll come into a little later. One of the things that our band did every year was we went on a band exchange. Our band would pack up, and we would travel to another town elsewhere, usually 6 to 8 hours away. We'd stay in those houses. We'd tour the town. We'd do this. We'd play a joint concert, and then they would come down and do the same. Well, in my sophomore year in high school, we went to this place called Lexington, Massachusetts. And I was enamored immediately. Don Gillespie was the band director. He was such a nice guy. I loved the building at that point. It's changed now since, but the auditorium. There was an auditorium with a real balcony. The kids were so great. There was a field house. The people I stayed with. Some of you may remember the pediatrician in town, Dr. White. His son Spencer was my host, and I stayed with them, and he stayed with me, and I got to know them. Of course, that's, if you know Jean Cole, that's her family too, and she worked with us in the department for decades as a volunteer at the school. So I thought that was by far, at that point, it made such a favorable impression on me, the town, the people, the music department, that I planted it and held on to it for later. Well, I auditioned for the Jazz Lab in my junior year, in my end of my sophomore year to go in junior, but I didn't get in. A good friend of mine, Ed Mellinger, who had started on clarinet, obviously, and then switched to tenor, but he's one who'd been taking private lessons since he was in 7th grade. And I still hadn't had a private lesson. It was all being done on my own at this point. And he was accepted, and he should have been accepted. He was a stronger player. But then in junior year, I took music theory, and that opened my eyes in so many ways. The mathematical part of that really sung to me because I was someone who, I really liked math. Math was always my best academic subject at school. I loved it, I was into it, I pushed ahead on it, I was always ahead of it, I liked it a lot. And the idea of those theory relationships, the chords, the scales, the progressions, all the things that went in there, really started to make more sense about improvisation and structure and creating melodies. It was really terrific. But I still wound up I was lucky to be the primary soloist in the Thursday night crowd, and there he is. Yeah, it was the 70s, what can I say? The polyester in the hair and so on. My soloing got better, I was given more responsibility, I played more with people around, I had friends, and then in my senior year, I made it into the Jazz Lab. And there was another little crossroads, something that happened that really helped me. Ed Mellinger, that friend of mine who had made it in the group, he works at the aquarium in Monterey. He was a real scientist, he loved it. He spent his whole summer in science camps and hadn't played a note. So the first day of school, when we both came into Jazz Lab, he came up to me and he said, look, I haven't really been playing all summer, and I know you've been doing a lot and you really like this. I think we should go to Mr. Ramsdell and tell him you should play first and I should play second. And I was like, overwhelmed. Such a nice thing to do, but we did it. And he played and he enjoyed the group and that sort of thing. Senior year then started turning things for me in different ways. I started studying privately. I studied with a man named Jacques Johnson, who was the first tenor player in the Army Blues. We were surrounded by the military bands, and we had a great source of free music everywhere. He was such a great human being, and I learned so much from him. Just in that year I studied with him. I got a new instrument. I got a Selmer Mark VI. That was sort of the gold standard for saxophones at that point. It cost me $525. Now it's about between $10,000 and $16,000 is what those instruments cost now. They don't make them anymore. These are the used ones that are selling for that amount. My band director asked me to be featured on a solo that the Army Blues had played that was written for my teacher, Loverman by Billie Holiday. It was, I can't even tell you how much I worked on that. Listen to her, listen to this. Tried to figure it all out and put it in there. Then we were going to the jazz festivals, having success, but then another crossroad, something that really helped really define where I went. A good friend of mine from 8th grade, who was by far the best drummer I had heard. When he was in junior high, he was playing with the high school groups, and he was the star soloist on everything we did at the high school. Dean McCall was his name. Great drummer. By the way, PhD in astrophysics and worked for Hughes Aircraft in the satellite division for years. He just retired, and he's still playing in rock bands in Colorado, where he retired as a drummer. It's great. Anyway, he was playing in a rock band outside of school, and they needed a saxophone player. He recommended me. They said yes. I went to join them. This was really the summer before senior year is when this started. That band is Cape Horn. It's a bad picture because it's fuzzy. It's the best I could do. I'm sort of the middle one on the left there. This band played mostly one-nighters. And, of course, this is before the age of disc jockeys, right? There aren't disc jockeys at every party. School dances, church dances, weddings, summer parties, pool parties, everybody needed a band. And so there were booking agents to do just that. We didn't have to find our own work. We worked through a group called Washington Talent Agency. So there was lots of work, and we were cover bands. We played the pop hits and for dancing. In December of that year, in December of our senior year, the bass player, who's top right there, Bobby Galloway, who was also the lead singer, got an offer from another club band, and he went with them, with a nightclub band, and he went with them. And we all went different ways, and the band broke up. But almost right away, we got a call from our booking agent saying there's another band who's looking for a drummer and a sax player. So in the middle of our senior year, we went up to Maryland and auditioned, and this band was called, and we were accepted into the band in late January. This band was called Prelude. Nice colors, huh? They were 25 to 30 years old. We were 17. They were primarily a nightclub band. And when we told them, they said, you guys go to George Mason, you go to this? I said, no, we're in high school. They went, whoa, will your parents let you play in nightclubs? And we said, yeah. And we did. So we were doing, it's a cover band. The nightclub work would be usually Tuesday through Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. We'd play 5 sets of 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off, and it was all hard rock dance music. It was a dance club. So I graduated, and we were still doing this in the summer and so on and so forth, and having a really good time with it. It was a good source of funds at that point, too, for what we were getting paid. At that point in my age, it was better than any part-time job I could get anywhere. So I graduated, and I enrolled part-time at George Mason University. Took part-time things. I took a more extended theory class. I was in their jazz ensemble. I took a Spanish class, and I took, for the first time, private lessons from a classical teacher. That brings us to another crossroad, a big one, probably the biggest. There was a gentleman named George Etheridge, and George Mason was a small school and up and coming. They didn't have their own sax teacher, so I had to drive to the University of Maryland where he taught. And I worked up, and I went in the first day, and I showed him what I had, and he said, oh, that mouthpiece. Oh, you can't, that sound, it's jazz. No, you got to have, so we had to get this mouthpiece and do this. And I did all that, went back the next week. He gave me this Closé book, said, I want you to work on that study for next week. Now, the study was basically a little run on C major, and it was really easy. And so I sort of looked at it and went through it and did it and put it down, went back the next week, and he said, can you play it? And I played it, and he said, well, did you practice that at all? I said, well, yeah, but it's pretty easy. He said, but did you listen to it? Look, the sound is so uneven from top to bottom, and the articulation, there's no articulation like that on there. I was articulating like a jazz musician as opposed to I was doing what I heard. He said, you've got to do this and this and this. And I said, okay. And I went back that week, and I started working out, and I had it so that I had the articulation right, and I worked on focusing my sound in the upper and lower range. I went back the next week, and I played it for him again. He said, did you look at this week at all? And I said, yes, I did. He said, well, it's so uneven. Can't you? And I said, I don't know what you mean. Can you? And he explained it to me. He said, well, yeah, between these two notes, the 16th notes have to be, they have to be very even, and yours aren't. You've got to work on that. And I thought, okay. So I went home. He said, try doing it with a metronome and really make that work. And I did. And I went home. And that week I was serious, because 3 weeks working on the C major thing, I was going to make something happen. And I started to sit down with my metronome and start it slower and get it pick up and work it through. But I found out when I was playing, and I was aware of what I was supposed to be listening for, that there were points when I reached a certain speed on the metronome that I couldn't make it even. That my fingers just between on both hands, they just wouldn't respond correctly at a certain speed. And I could hear it, and I was going over the slow metronome, the fast metronome, 2 and 3 hours a day on this one C major exercise because it was plugging me out. I was so frustrated the day or two before I was going to go back to my lesson that I just couldn't get it to the tempo he wanted and get it even. No matter how much time I spent on it, I was so frustrated. I went up and sat down in my living room when my parents were, and I sort of collapsed, and I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I should be doing this. This may not be the right choice for me. And I explained what the problem was. My mother said to me, I wonder if that has something to do with that thing we had you tested for in first grade. I have no memory of it. And I said, what was it? And he said, well, your grades when you were coming home were all A's except in handwriting, and you kept getting D's in handwriting. And we thought there might be something wrong, so we had you tested. And the doctor who tested you said you have a fine motor coordination deficiency. And I almost sank. My response was, you mean I'm never going to be able to do this? And I had to really give it seriously thought. I canceled my lesson with the guy up there, and I went back for a lesson with my old teacher, Jacques Johnson, and we played a few things together, and I said, look, I need to talk to you, and explained the whole thing to him. I said, I just don't know what to do. I should probably stop doing this and look for another thing to do. And this was the big one. He said, Jeff, if music was all about how fast and how even you could play, they'd put it in the Olympics and give you a medal for it. That's not what music is about. And he explained, he talked about connection with people, soulfulness, creation, you know, all the things that we talk about music, the ability to express without words, to reach in and move people with sound. See, those are the things you're looking at. And he said, you know, and I've watched you this last year, and there's so many things you've got going for you. I understand if this frustrates you and you think you should quit, but it would be a shame if you did. I didn't quit. I didn't, you know, when school finished, our keyboard player, the end of the first semester, our keyboard player, who was the one in the front with my soprano sax, he was a pilot, and he was leaving the group. He got a better offer from a better airline. He was flying sort of commercial airlines around, or, you know, small pilots for things. Our agent set us up with an offer from a male and female vocal duet who wanted to go on the road with a big band. They'd been playing themselves just as a duo. They wanted to go on a road with a band and take their actor on the road. Well, a couple of players did want to go. We replaced them, and we were no longer, though, a dance band now. We were a show band. First set is a light rock and jazz dinner set, then a floor show. An original, you know, people sit in a nightclub and watch the show. Then a hardcore dance set, then another floor show, and another hardcore set. Still 5 sets a night. So I joined Love Affair. There they are. Mark and Eileen and the rest of the gang. You see some of the ones from Failure. Somehow I always got in the back of these pictures. I don't know why. We were now traveling. We were on the road, so that's why I left school. We were up and down the East Coast. We were in Detroit to Florida, a little bit of everywhere. But when we hit February, Mark and Eileen decided they were going to go back to doing a duet because they were not making the money they were hoping to make. You know, they realized that paying 8 people was a lot rougher than playing 2. So they went back to that. But again, our agent came to us and said, look, we've got a 3-voice male vocal act. They are really good. They've got their floor shows all set. They've got a 6-piece band just like yours, and that band is breaking up and they're leaving. They're looking for a band. Are you interested? We said, yeah, let's talk. We met, played. They said it went really well. The guitar player and drummer wanted to leave the road. We got new people, and we joined White Heat. I don't know why I'm the only one with my eyes open, but that's the way it was. Now we're playing in bigger clubs, greater reach. We're in Canada. We're in Eastern U.S., all up and down. We're in the Bahamas. We opened for Donna Summer at the front page in New Orleans. And, you know, at 18 years old in 20 years old in 1978, I was making $500 a week for playing 2 sets a night to open for Donna Summer. I thought, how can life get any better than this? You know? Then we had another little crossroad. The singer, the front left, Jeff Lowe, who was doing the business for the band. And by doing the business for the band, what we found out that meant was he was the one that the club owner would write a check to him. He would endorse it, get cash, and pay us. The IRS didn't think very highly of that. And he got himself in trouble. And he said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to do it. One of you that rest, you have to do it. No one else would step up. So here I was, the youngest. And at this point, the oldest person in the band was the singer on the right. He went by Billy Love. His name was Billy Dunbar. He went by Billy Love. He was in the original Broadway cast of Hair. He didn't have an apartment or a house. He had no residence. He had no car. Everything he owned, he carried with him week to week with the band, and he stayed in a hotel if we had a week off. So I took it. I said, I'll do this. I was the youngest. I'll do this. And they were grumbling because I made them sign for it and keep records and all that sort of thing. But I learned so much at that point about business and about what was going on, dealing with the club owners, dealing with the agent, thinking ahead, doing the planning, all that goes into that. Then the final crossroad for this one, or the 8th one for this one, our agents came to us with a proposition to say, look, you're one of our biggest selling acts, but you need things. You need to improve your lighting. You need to improve your costumes and your PA equipment. You need to modernize your show. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you an interest-free loan for 10 years. An interest-free loan for $10,000 for 10 weeks. We guarantee we will keep you working for those 10 weeks, and your salaries will be going up. But you'll pay us back $1,000 a week out of the gross pay until you reach that 10th week. We guarantee you that on the 10th week, you won't notice the loss of salary, and by the 11th week, you'll take a big bump. The band went, yeah. The singer says, no way. We're not going, and they own the show. We're not doing that. we're not going to go that. Nobody's going to keep my money or withhold anything from me. I'm not going to have that. It was an hour and a half knockdown, drag out, and I finally said, okay. I gave my notice. I had applied and got accepted to Berklee. I was going to leave the band. This was early June. I gave them 6 weeks. I wound up staying in the band till Labor Day. Our last gig with this band was at the Harbor House in Lynn. We closed on the day before Labor Day, and I moved into my dorm in Berklee the next day. So there I was. Now I'm back at school. Excited, because now I'm back in the jazz world. You know, I'd been out of it. I'd been in the rock and roll top 40 show band thing. I'm back there. My parents were desperately concerned, as was the case at that point. Music? You're going to major in music? And they said, you better have something to fall back on. We really think you should go into music education. So I did. I said, yeah, sure, I can, because I was able to do the other courses. I was so fired up to be back in school. I was such a tool. I was such a nerd. Every class, I get an assignment in a class, and I'd have it done that night or after school if I didn't have another class then. I was so excited about everything that was going on with me. I had grown so much. That would never have been me if I had come right out of high school. I've been skipping my academic classes and just playing. I was involved in everything. It's one of the reasons I became a component, someone who really backed the idea of a gap year for kids who weren't quite sure what they wanted to do. Because my three gap years changed my life in so many ways. I was voracious. The other students actually teased me. They called me Mr. Music Ed. Yeah, Mr. Music Ed's here. And then finally, my next crossroad, I decided, thinking ahead, the planning that I had learned from the road, I went into my freshman first semester. I went into the music ed office, and I wanted to meet with Doc Lacey, the chair, and he wasn't there. And there's a woman sitting behind the desk. He said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah." Look, I know down the road I'll be looking to student teach, and I'd really be interested in student teaching in Lexington, Massachusetts. Do you ever put people there? And she went, "Oh, look, we only send our best to Lexington. You're going to have to prove yourself to get that placement. I can't promise you that at this point." And I was like, "Oh, okay." After a little more discussion, I found out this woman's name was Deanna Kidd. She was the lead elementary teacher at Harrington School for 16 years before she went to Berklee to teach music ed students. She was very protective of Lexington. But I got the message. You better take care of business. Anyway, in my sophomore year, another thing that happened was really great. Berklee instituted a double major for music ed majors. You could take some of the music majors along with music education. It was a 5-year program. I jumped into it at the end of my sophomore year right away. Now, because of what I'd done in my previous college and other things and what I'd learned, I had a lot of credit by exam and was able to push it through. I also had nowhere, I was paying for my own education. I had nowhere near the money to pay for a 5th year. I had to get out and get working. So I was able to push through credit by exam, talk to professors, go around and meet people, part of the schmoozing you learn as a working with the club owners and that sort of thing. And I was able to finish in 4 years. So I got to be the first person to graduate with a double major from Berklee. So I graduated summa with a double major in music ed and jazz composition and arranging. And I did my student teaching in the spring with Lexington High School. Don Gillespie, Joe DiDomenico, Sandy Peasley, Bob Legue, Carol Messina. Those were my teachers and my mentors at that point. This is conducting one of the concerts there. I was fabulous. And again, I had a 15-week placement. I started January 2nd, and my last day was 8 weeks after my graduation from Berklee, when I was helping Don Gillespie file band materials that they had used that year to get started for next year. I wanted to work in the town so badly, and of course, right now we're in the Proposition 2.5 phase, right? And that in those 4 or 5 years, just after Proposition 2.5, 1,500 music teachers in Massachusetts lost their jobs. When the tax rate wasn't there, that's where they went first, because don't they always? So I was really concerned about being able to find a job at this point. I asked Don. There was an elementary classroom tea. I said, "Do you think I should apply for that?" He said, "No." He said, "You need to go out and look and do what you do. Don't try and fit yourself into someone else. Do what you do and, see what happens down the road." Well, I applied to Andover. I thought what I thought would be a potential job in Andover. I'll describe the circumstances a little bit. And I applied. I had all sorts of things going for me First-year bachelors, I was really cheap. It was really inexpensive to hire. Lexington's faculty was known around the state. Don Gillespie founded the Northeast District and was one of the first presidents of the Music Educators Association. Joe DiDomenico was the current Music Educators president. Sandy Peasley was helping to write the AP for music theory. These people were known all around the state. And with their references, plus one from Gene Sullivan, the principal of Diamond, because I'd helped out on a trip to D.C. that the junior high chorus had taken, I got the job, which was in Andover, teaching instrumental music. But at my interview, Deanna Colbin asked me, she said, your application and letter came in before we ever posted the job. Why is that? And I thought, okay, this is it. Do I go straight and tell the truth? Or do I make up some story about Andover? I lived in a suburban community and I want to teach. It just sounded like such a great place and I just want to, their jobs are hard. And I said, no, I better be straight. And I said, look, I know this sounds awful and it may cost me a job and I understand that, but I have to tell you what it was. I saw Mr. Graceffa's obituary in the Globe and thought there would be a job open. So I sent my letter in. And she thought that was the best thing she ever heard. Because she said, that go-getter, that sort of thing. So I got the job. Well, after a year in Andover, Don Gillespie retired. And I got the job in Lexington. I was teaching harmony analysis, band, 2 jazz classes, great mentors, and a town that really valued our work. I was absolutely in heaven. It was the best thing to start there, all these wonderful people around. We were also really well supported, so the program could grow, and I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but for 26 years, I was the band and jazz director. When I started, again, this is why the town really they provided us the resources we needed to make it grow, which is why I'm always so grateful to live here. When I started, there were 57 students in the band. When I retired, there were 210 in 3 bands. When I started, there were 2 jazz classes. When I retired, there were 9. And the orchestras grew and so on and so forth. I was the acting department chair in my 5th, 6th, and 7th year for a half year, and a full year right after Joe DiDomenico passed away. I learned a lot from that. Then they combined the music and art department, and I went back and I was the teacher, which I wouldn't change at all. The things that I got to do with my students and that sort of thing was phenomenal. During the last 8 years, I became, sort of grudgingly, I became the department head because I knew that meant I would be teaching less. I'd be less in front of kids. But I also knew that I'd been there the longest. I knew the town. I lived in the town. I was around. 4 of the school committee members had students in my classes. I could be useful to the department, so I took that job. And I don't regret it. I would have had more fun with making music with students, but I don't regret it. I retired, and now I teach in the music ed department. I'm an associate professor at Berkeley. I am an adjunct professor at BU. I teach in the prep division at New England Conservatory. I do a lot of playing again, which is a fun thing to be back to in local theaters. I do guest conducting like today. I just spent the last 2 days conducting the Eastern Junior District Band. They had an 8-hour rehearsal yesterday and a 6-hour rehearsal and a concert today. 125 7th through 9th graders. It was fabulous. They were just wonderful. That's why my throat's a little tired, you can probably hear. I do clinics, I do workshops. I wouldn't change it at all. I've been blessed through all that. My wife tells me I'm really bad at retirement, which is true. But I think there are probably those times she's happy to have me out of the house too. But that was my journey. That's how I got from there to here. It was pretty remarkable to me. In preparation for this, I did a survey. Somebody set up a Facebook page for my retirement that they opened it up to me because it was supposed to be a secret afterwards. And I did a survey of those people. I just sent out a blanket survey about their involvement in music. Here's what came back. I got 72 responses. 31 said, oh, just a listener really, but yes and no. 41 still, 56% still go to concerts. 15% are professional musicians at their first vocation. 22.5% are amateur or are professional musicians as a secondary vocation. 33% are amateur musicians that play in organized groups, and another 27% play with friends and family. There's 70 some or a little bit more of that when you cross it over, percent of people who are still involved in music. You know, that is the best thing. That's the wonderful thing about it. Here's how they break down. Almost 70% are instrumentalists, which makes sense because that was where I was. But, you know, 43% are vocalists, and there's a crossover there, people who do both. 8.3 are dancers, and 15% are theater performers. Really exciting. And it's provided me some opportunities. I want to play a little cut of a film for you right now. Just some music, so you can see some of the stuff that's coming up. I've got to pull this out of presenter mode and come over to here. Yeah, there we go. Charlie was going to get in one way or another. All right. You know, truth is I should give this a little preference. This is the Lexington Symphony, concert back in 2013. It was a Howard Brubeck composition, Dave Brubeck's brother, that was written for the Dave Brubeck Quartet and the New York Philharmonic with Leonard Bernstein. It's called Dialogues for Jazz Combo and Orchestra. And you'll hear the dialogues when this, I'm going to just play a little snippet for you. So you hear the leading into the first solo section, the dialogue section. And there's a piano solo with the orchestra playing. There's a saxophone solo with the orchestra playing. There's a drum solo with the orchestra playing. There's another little saxophone solo. There's a bass solo. The band were all LHS graduates, people who I'd worked with in the jazz combo. And it's not like you usually get in a jazz band where the soloist is just playing. It is a dialogue. The orchestra is interjecting in and out. So I'll sort of narrate a little bit, but just wanted you to see some of this. All right. You hear the piano soloing, interacting with it. Now, the drummer. It's a little hard to hear on the recording. We're heading into another section, but I'm actually going to stop there so we can move on. And I want to tell you a little bit about, let me get back into my proper presentation view here. It'll pop up. There we go. What you should know about those people from Lexington High School who are playing. The pianist is actually on our panel tonight, Malcolm Campbell. He was a 2006 graduate of Lexington High School, and currently he is a neuroscience postdoc at Harvard. After getting his PhD at Stanford, he did a double major between Harvard and NEC. I think the first person to do that in the jazz. So he's doing okay for himself. And then the bass player is Raviv Markovitz, who some of you may know his parents or that sort of thing. Raviv's played all over the world. He's doing his residency in Hackensack as a doctor after getting his MD in Israel while he was playing bass all over the world on a professional level. Joe Masaki, who's here tonight, 2005 graduate. He was an undergraduate neuroscience major at Northeastern. He did an NEC graduate diploma, and he's currently the senior software developer for Fidelity Asset Management and does a huge amount of video recording and editing. And then there's an old band director that was the other guy on the tape. Our folks have done pretty well for themselves, and they're all still playing and still deeply involved in music. We want to move on to our panel and bring them up and have them say a few things right now. So as they start to come up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the people you're going to see, and we have some questions to go back and forth. And at the end, for those who are interested, there'll be a little Q&A if you want to dig in a little deeper. First of all, we have Betty Bloom. Betty I met her as the secretary of the board for Lexington Symphony. She was a medical office manager. She was an English teacher. 15 years, she was a stay-at-home mom. She sang with the Boston Cecilia for 10 years and with the Tanglewood Festival Chorus for about 30 years. Retiring, so you see her on the right was her last performance at Tanglewood. We have Malcolm Campbell, neuroscience postdoc at Harvard, 26 LHS combo and jazz ensemble graduate. NEC, I already told you all about him. Still plays piano trio called After the Times and still plays in various groups in New York, San Francisco, and Boston. Ali Lauer grew up in Concord. She's a math teacher. She's done special ed at high school in Acton. She's a member of the Bicentennial Band, but an active player and trumpet player. She plays with the Arlington Philharmonic, the Lexington Bicentennial Band, and various musical theater productions around. We've got Christina Lieber. She was in the UNH marching band. You can see here. She's from Vermont. She played the concert band and wind ensemble, marching band and wind ensemble at UNH. She went to grad school at Georgia Tech, where she played in the concert band. She is now the principal data software engineer for iRobot, and she plays in the Bicentennial Band and the Metropolitan Wind Symphony. She also plays bassoon and saxophone. And we have Alex Tung. He's our youngest panelist. I have to say this without any hesitation. Alex is the best trumpet player I worked with at Lexington High School. He was the only one that was deeply rooted and authentically rooted in both the jazz and the classical worlds, and came in as a freshman being able to play both of them really well. He was an LHS graduate. He did an NEC Tufts double degree. He left the NEC, kept playing in the non-jazz majors, or non-majors jazz ensemble for a bit, but majored in biology and is now pre-med. And in order to boost his chances, he's doing that while he's studying for the MCAT. He's an EMT with Caltado Ambulance Services, and he drives ambulances and saves people. Pretty remarkable. He still plays with me. When he was a sophomore, I hired him to play down at Regal Music Theater in Boston. So these are our groups. And we've got some questions for him. Hope you find them interesting. Can I start with Christina? All right. So with all the work you've done in being an engineer, why do you still have music in your life?
For sanity's sake. But like in all seriousness, I have a bachelor's degree in computer science. I have a master's degree in computer science. STEM degrees are hard. Like they're not to say that non-STEM degrees aren't, but like it's a lot of work. It can be grueling. There's so much that you have to get done. And it's really easy to fall into this trap of like, I have to get everything here perfect so that like I have the best grades and everything. That's actually not so great for your grades, and it's really not so great for your mental health either. So having something else that you can do and just get away from all of that is key. So when I would go to rehearsal all throughout my school career, whatever project is hanging over my head, whatever exam I have the next week, doesn't exist for those 2 hours that I'm in rehearsal. It would get me the opportunity to use a completely different side of my brain, like as Jeff was talking about earlier, and just get me into socializing with a whole different group of people I didn't have classes with, people who did something completely different and that I would never have met. And honestly, it still plays the same role for me. It's this thing that I can go to and meet a bunch of people that I otherwise would never have met and just get me to do something completely different with my brain for a little while.
And you like it too, right?
Oh, it's a lot of fun. That too, that's important. Sanity and fun. I mean, what else do you need, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's such a common answer among people who continue to play, and it's an important one. So let me see. Let me try Malcolm, because he picked up and moved across the country to Stanford to get his PhD. So how did moving to California affect your involvement in music?
Yeah, well, you had talked a lot about different crossroads in your life, in your story, and that was a big one for me, because prior to that I had been very serious about music. Almost, it was a point of like, am I going to do this professionally? I was in New York right prior to moving to California. I was playing, I was making an album, I was feeling really great about my playing. That clip was, I guess, right around that time.
Right around that time. Yeah.
I decided I really love science too. It's always been a double sort of life, two passions that I've had. I decided to go for the science thing, move to California, and I sort of thought at that time that this is it. You know, I'm giving up on the music thing. I'm not going to play. Just have to bite the bullet and go do the PhD, and too bad. But it turned out to be really not the case at all. I really got involved in the music scene in the Bay Area. There's a workshop at Stanford. There's a Stanford Jazz Workshop, which turns it into like a little mini New York kind of in the summertime. Like Josh Redman comes through, Mark Turner comes through, Ethan Iverson comes through. And I met a lot of people, and I continued to play, so much so that when I graduated, my advisor, when you do PhD defense, oftentimes your advisor kind of roasts you, you kind of roast your advisor. She put a little picture of me up that she had photoshopped of me. She found a picture on Facebook of me playing the piano or something and had photoshopped like my thesis onto the piano. She was like, oh, this is him like working on his thesis while he's doing his real job. And she had said like, oh, she was worried that I wasn't going to be serious about it because I was playing so much music. But for me, I really relate to what Christina had said. It kept me sane during my PhD, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm glad I've been able to keep doing it.
So that's such a great surprise to have been, to think I'm done with it. But you just naturally gravitate. You just can't stay away, right? Yeah, exactly. That's exciting. These are great stories. Let's see. Let's go to Allie. Math teacher, special ed, so on and so forth. So what do you tell your students about your involvement in music and what maybe potentially could be theirs?
Sure. Well, let me just back up a second. So I was a band kid in middle school and high school, and 10 out of 10 would definitely recommend. It's a great experience. But I really wasn't that good. I spent all my time in the second trumpet section. I did not go to junior or senior district. I did not go to Al State. Frankly, did not practice that much. But I loved it. And I really had no idea there was a space for people who are kind of okay as adults. Like, I kind of thought you either had to go be a professional or pack up your instrument when you graduated. And then, fast forward 10 years after high school, and I found that community groups were a thing. And there are community groups that are of all skill levels and of all sizes and of all types of music. You can concert bands and orchestras and choruses and big bands, and it's just wonderful. And so I try really hard to make sure I'm the adult that says to them, your vocation, how you earn your money, and your avocation don't have to be the same thing. And there's so much space, and it's so important to continue to make music. For me, that's what I love. And it's also really important to there's a space to make music badly. It's still fulfilling, and it's still really important to do it badly. Much more important than doing it not at all. And also, it's amazing how much you will improve when you start practicing as a grown-up.
That's great. By the way, I just want to reiterate that once we're really at the tail end of this now. Once we finish, the panel's going to hang around. If you have individual questions or things you want to talk or address, please come up and interact with us. It doesn't have to be something public. We'll do a Q&A as well a little later. But if you want to talk to them afterwards, please, you can do. Let's go to Alex. How has music allowed you to keep contacts while you're beginning to really deepen your professional training? And tell them a little bit about what you're doing with your next steps here.
Right. So as Jeff mentioned, I play at Regal Music Theater, just a fantastic theater over in Waltham, and Regal is special to me for a couple of reasons. One of them is over his tenure at LHS, Jeff has actually amassed so many of his students, and he's hired them to come play in the pit over at Regal. So I'm one of them. And every time I come to play at Regal, it's always a game. How many Lexingtonians are there in the pit here at Regal? There are 7, 8, 9 of us. I think one of them is out there. Mitchell's out there somewhere. But it's, in addition to playing with literally generations of Lexington High School students in the pit, I'm also playing with Jeff. I'm playing with my teachers who used to be my mentors at Lexington High School. I've come full circle here. You're not Mr. Leonard anymore. You're Jeff. It's
Still Mr. Leonard.
It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It'll never become normal. But yeah, Regal is it continues to be the main place where I make my music, and it's just a treat every time I come back. So absolutely. Music just will always keep me connected to those people that I met in Lexington High School.
That's great. It's funny, the Mr. Leonard thing is something that I fight all the time. People who are, 6 or 7 years younger than me come up and showing me the grandchildren saying, and this is Mr. Leonard. I said, please don't call me that. We're well past that. All right. And I'd like to go to Betty Bloom now. After the decades she spent with the Tanglewood Festival Chorus, she could do one of these talks with some stories that would, but she's got some fascinating things. So Betty, what was unexpected or surprising about how music impacted your life and that of your family?
The biggest surprise I had in music was being accepted into Tanglewood Festival Chorus when I was 47 years old. Never having had any of the experiences that these people have had. My entire music experience as a child through high school was essentially singing hymns in church and singing in very mediocre church and high school and college choirs. After college, I married and earned my PhD, putting my husband through as we did in those days. And I did no singing at all for 10 or 12 years. And then we had ended up in Montreal, and we're at a church that had the best church choir in the city, and arguably the best choir in Canada. This church choir did the CBC Christmas Eve services. And because I was active in the church and they needed a church choir crossover, the director allowed me to join the choir. I later learned that he who has won every award Canada can give for service to the country ran the toughest audition that any people had hit. But he allowed me in, and I began to learn. I barely knew how to read music. I knew no theory. Anyway, I could go for 15 minutes about that choir experience. When we moved down to Boston after I'd been in that group about 4 years, I again didn't bother to try to find a group. Nothing could have matched it. And then, like they say, I got hungry. I would hear a choir and I would get hungry. And so I was able to join Boston Cecilia and sang with Don Teeters for 10 years. We had to re-audition every 3 years, so again, sight reading, but learning by the skin of my teeth, learning by doing. And after about 6 or 8 years, about 8 or 9 years in Teeters group, one of my co-singers said, you could probably do a little bit more with your singing than this. And about a couple of weeks after that, I was doing a Christmas Carol concert at a party in our neighborhood, and one of the women said to me, you have quite a nice voice. Have you ever studied? I was 43 years old at the time. I said, no, I never have. Why? She said, you should, and here's my card. So at 43 years old, I began taking voice lessons and began again to learn and to be, and to, when you sing, your instrument is who you are. And it was fantastic. And so I worked with her. I actually took a 6-month course at Newton Music School with Adam Grossman, who many of you may know, on music theory. And being terrible at math, whoever was saying they were good, I couldn't figure it out, but at least I got a little bit of a sense. And then in 1990, the spring of 1990, I, by total fluke, happened to notice when I was putting away the Sunday Globe that there was an advertisement for Tanglewood Festival Chorus. And my kids were old enough by then that I thought, I really could leave home for 3 days if I had to this summer. And on a lark, I sent in my name I went down to the audition. I felt like I had my choir director sitting on one shoulder, my mom on another shoulder, my music voice teacher backing me up, Adam holding my hand. And with joy and excitement and terror, I went to the audition. 2 weeks later, when I finally got the phone call saying that I had been accepted, I walked on air for 2 weeks. And as he said, I sang with them for 30 years, including tours to Europe, trips to Carnegie, always singing here in Boston Symphony. For most of that time, we memorized our music. So as a middle-aged person, that was a very big ego booster. And it just sort of, it created for me my own thing. Because as I said, I basically had taken care of my family. And now all of a sudden, this was mine. And they tailored their schedule to my schedule for a change. And a final comment, I quit TFC in 2018, shortly after we moved up here to Lexington, and found a couple of other small groups to sing with. But as far as how lifetime goes, the only singing I'm doing now is at Brookhaven, where I am living. And once a week, there is a singing for fun, half hour at Brookhaven. And I choose a half an hour's worth of songs that everybody knows. I've been working on the railroad to Camelot to spirituals. We just did 2 weeks of spirituals. And from 15 to 25 senior citizens, some in wheelchairs, some with walkers, some with good choral experience, come and we sing for fun. And that you can do all your life.
Yeah. These are such fascinating and varied stories, and they lead to the same place, which is so exciting. I want to add something to Betty's that you may not be aware of. Did you know that Tanglewood Festival Chorus does not get paid? They are a volunteer group. Did you know that they don't get their travel expenses paid for the most part? They pay for all of it, and they still do it because because of what you said, because you love it. We've got another LHS grad that would like to speak to us for a minute. So if you will permit us to show this.
Hi, Lexingtonians. Great to see you. And thank you so much, Jeff Leonard, for including me in this lecture. My name is Carolyn Bertozzi. I was born in Lexington. I was raised there. I went to Lexington High School. I graduated in 1984, if you can believe it. And Jeff Leonard, at the time, was a fairly new music teacher who introduced me to the world of jazz. Music has been part of my life since I was a small kid, and my mom signed me up for piano lessons at the age of 6. And when I was at Lexington High School, I played in a jazz combo. I accompanied the musicals. I played with a jazz singing group. So I was very involved in music, and it was really the thing I looked forward to most, just about every day. Now, I live in California. I'm a chemistry professor at Stanford University, and so I have a busy life that's focused on science and research, and the kind of research we do is meant to benefit human health. But music is still very much part of my life, and I would say it is really the only reason I can stay sane on a daily basis. You can see on the walls in my place here that I have a lot of art and instruments and things that remind me of music. Even though keyboard is my main instrument, about a year ago, I decided it was time to learn another instrument that I've always loved, and that is the electric bass. So here's my bass, and I practice 30 minutes every day. Jeff, you'll be happy to hear that. But I just wanted to encourage everybody here, first of all, to celebrate music on a daily basis, and to stick with it, throughout your life, even if you have busy, schedules and work requirements and family obligations. Music is something you can do with your friends, you can do with your family. I encourage all kids to get involved in music as young as they can. And I really hope that all of you enjoy some music experience today and every day. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Bye.
Oops, stop.
Hi, Lexington.
There are actually a couple things that she forgot to mention. That she won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2022, which is pretty important. And when we talked a couple of weeks ago, she said she played her first gig with a group of 50-some women on electric bass a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco. So, yeah, it can stay with you for a long time. What I'd like to do now, if we can, is if there are any questions from the audience, and you know, there we go. We got some microphones coming out. If there are any questions for our panelists, their incredible, unique backgrounds and pathways, please feel free to ask. I remind you, if you don't want to do it out loud here, but you have some questions, feel free to come up when we're done. We're going to linger for a little bit, and we'll interact and catch up and that sort of thing. So we'd like to have you in both orders. But does anybody have anything that you'd like to ask? Yes. We need it for the recording. We need it for the recording.
Oh, for the recording. Excuse me. Sorry. I always think I know best. That's wrong, of course. So I've been part of this town, and I'm a music teacher and a professional musician, and I know Betty, and thank you, Betty, for that story. That's really great, since we may be doing something together at some point. But I want to say something about music for another group of people that is very important. It's not only for those of us that are professionals in music or in science or whatever. It's for a group, and I'm going to make an example. We have a group in Lexington called SNAP, Special Needs Arts Programs. And music, as you know, has to be part of our lives, right? No matter what profession you're in. But music can make a difference in some of these people that don't have other parts of the life. It helps them to become part of a community. It brings them out. They can do something together that they can't do anywhere else. So music has many things that it's done on this level that you've been talking about. But for parts of our community that cannot do the sports, perhaps, and some of the other things, but music crosses every part of the community. So I just wanted to remind people that it has that possibility too, and it's very important, and we should support it at any time.
Anybody else with a question, an idea, a thought, something that's bothering you? No? Okay. Well, look, as I say, please, if you know some of the folks here or I haven't said hello to, come up and visit, ask, engage us at the end. We'd really like to just talk, and you may have a one-on-one question that might be relevant that you, we've got someone coming up to the front. Okay.
This is for Jeff and the community. You told us about the wonderful things that you continue to do at the university level, at other high school levels in the state. But everyone in town can hear you, see you perform and direct the Bicentennial Band. You did not mention us.
I didn't? I took over for Don Gillespie in '96 and have been doing it since. It is one of the most rewarding things I do. Two of these folks actually play in the Bicentennial Band, which is their connection here. And it's what Ali was saying, is one of those critical groups. Don started it for the Bicentennial. We've kept it going. We've got a lot going on in the next couple of years, and I'm sure you'll see us around. So thank you for that. Anybody else, anything? Okay. So let me wrap things up really quickly. We've seen a lot. I've gone over a lot, my story particularly, but a lot of other things tonight. They're wonderful stories and all the things that brought them together. But the most important thing, and the thing I'm looking for this, and things we're talking about this, is not to necessarily pursue this as a vocation, but to always pursue it as a passion. Avid involvement in music is critical to people's well-being, which we talked about. And in the end, and the most important thing, those of us in music, it's not about making a living, it's about making a life.
So thank you very much, Jeff. It was wonderful. When Jeff is very humble about this. When we first were thinking as a committee to put together something that the community would love, we knew that the community of Lexington is very special about music. And when I reached out to Jeff about putting this together, he was a font of all these great ideas. And he put a tremendous amount of work to put together the panel, work with them, find people. And I want to just thank you again, Jeff, for doing it, because it's what makes Lexington wonderful. And for those of you who will be here on Patriots Day, Jeff has been made the Grand Marshal, and Lexington. And if there are any, Jeff mentioned that if there are any players, go ahead, Jeff.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things we're doing, and if you know people that can do this, this is something I didn't want to take on. And I've been asked to be the Grand Marshal, and when talking with the committee, we were talking about they call it an honor guard or assistants or that sort of thing. And what we've come up with is this: anybody from any time period, from the band, majorettes, flag troop, banner holders that marched that parade when they were at Lexington High School are welcome to come and march the parade with the Grand Marshal again and be what they call the honor guard. Anybody who's done that over the years and would like to come and just celebrate all the things that the high school musicians have done with those parades, giving up their April vacation when their friends are gone, giving up Veterans Day when people are sleeping in, giving up Memorial Day, we're going to celebrate them with that. And if you know anybody or has anybody around that would like to do that, tell them we're going to be there on the Patriots Day parade at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Jeff. And one last round of applause for the panel and for Jeff. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. And again, if you want to say hello, have questions, please drop up.